1, 2, 3, audio test.
Hi, this is CB Radio Magazine, and had an interesting meter come across my bench. This is the Yosan model HJ-502, and gotta take a deep breath here. This is the SWR, power, FM deviation, AM modulation, field strength, frequency counter. So quite a few different things built into this little box. There were a couple models like this that were built out there. There was the Rama 250 and the Altai PDC 1000. So definitely a couple different versions of this. You don't see a whole lot of these in the States, mostly overseas. And kind of interesting because it does have AM modulation, FM deviation reading ability in it, along with a frequency counter in it. So you don't usually get all of that together in most meters. There was like a Dozy recently, a couple years back, that did have a frequency counter in it, and it could show AM modulation and stuff. But yeah, quite a lot in this box. So let's go through some of the features on it. So it does have cords going out the back for power. You got to get power into it, just 12 volt. It has an on-off switch here. It has a high-low frequency, so you can flip this into a different position here if you need to move your decimal over for either high or low frequencies. In the low position, it's designed to measure from 1 to 99 megahertz, and in the high position, it's designed to go from 1 up to 250 megahertz. So that also is kind of interesting. Has a switch here for your deviation, FM deviation or AM modulation you're going to measure. It also has another switch that you have to do for this for deviation, modulation, or your calibration down here. So it's kind of interesting how you go through the process. I'll show you that. Frequency counter, of course, 5-digit here. You have a 10 watt, 100 watt, or 1 kilowatt power scale options here. And over here we've got an option for power, SWR, calibration, field strength, or your deviation modulation. So first off, I'll show you guys here, just with the power on. We'll put this in the 10 watt position. And what we need to do is actually zoom in on the meter so you can see this. We've zoomed in on the meter. We're going to be looking at this middle line here for power, initially in the 10 watt position. And you'll see it says 10 watt, 100 watt, 1000 watt. 1000 watt would be the upper scale on that next line. So we're going to key up with the President McKinley on AM here. And it's showing us about 5.25 watts. So it's not completely accurate on this radio, because this radio I know is not doing that much. So got to take it with a little bit of the grain of salt in the 10 watt position. I'll switch to the 100 watt position. And in the 100 watt position, this is the top part of that line. You'll see it's 10 watts, 5 watts, and it's actually at 4 watts there. So it's actually a little more accurate right now on the 100 watt scale than on the low scale. You will see the, move this here, you'll see that the frequency is shown here. We're on channel 40, so 27.405. And yeah, like that would be super helpful if you were trying to figure out where you are with extra frequencies on a radio going above or below. And if you're going to do the SWR, I'm going to zoom back out and show you how to do that. Keep knocking our tripod today. For SWR, you'll switch it to the SWR calibration position. What you do to set the calibration is you actually pull this knob out, and then you'll key up with your radio, and you want to put it right on the line here on the top scale on the set position there, and then you will push it in, and it'll give you your SWR. You can see it just barely moving, which is correct. So that is good, showing us SWR. I'm not going to do the field strength here, but you could do that as well. The instructions are there, and I'll post a link to those as well. FM deviation and modulation. So you would flip the switch down to this position, and then down here, you would need to flip it down into this calibration position. And then what you do is you pull the knob out, you key up, and then there's a AM modulation, an FM line here. It's this double line right in the middle here, and you can see where it says 100, 120% and a calibration notch there. So we will move that into the calibration position. I should stop talking while I do this. And once we get that pretty close, now you can switch this into the modulation position, and you would have your modulation position there. Audio, and as you can see now it's swinging upwards with a full whistle. It's hitting about 90%. For the FM deviation, it's actually a very similar process. You flip this to the deviation position. This one, you go into the calibration. You, again, would key up. You set it. Of course, you have to be in FM mode to do this. You set it to your calibration position, and then you click up, and then you can check your FM deviation. This is the inside of the meter, and this is the back side here where your coaxial cables come in. You can see there's some pots on here, and it's got, it says SWR 1 watt, 10 watt, and 100 watt. And then this one says SWR, I'm trying to read from the side. This one says SWR deviation. It's got a couple CAN adjustments here, and it's got a Toshiba TC5032P chip in here. And then, let me flip this around so you can see the board. Looking at the other side, this is the front side of the meter. You can see the big face here for the meter. You can see the readout. This is where your segments are for your readout on your display, frequency display. And that is a board behind it. And that has a ribbon cable attached to this board. And then this is a separate board over here that also has ribbon cables that come and attach over here along with some wires. And this board is the one that has your switches on it, as well as your control knob. So quite a lot going on in this little guy. This is the back side, and it has a nice little map showing you, visual map showing what everything is. This is your antenna connection. This is where your transmitter connection would go. Power cables coming out here. This is where your field strength antenna would screw in. I don't actually have the antenna, but it has threads here that it would screw into. Over here is something I forgot to mention. This actually has an RCA jack on it where you could plug an RCA style connector onto here, and it would have two leads off of it, and then it would have alligator clips or whatever on it, and you could connect that up and use this as a frequency counter. So on the front, it would display the frequency. So if you weren't trying to measure, say, frequency coming in through the jacks here, and you were trying to measure something inside a radio or something else, you could do that via this RCA jack. So that's definitely pretty unique to see that on a frequency counter. So that's the Yosan model HJ-502 SWR power meter, FM deviation, AM modulation, field strength, frequency counter meter. Quite a few packages in a pretty compact design. It's not very big, and you know, I wouldn't be using this as my main meter for doing any adjustments or anything on radios, just because it's a little bit off, maybe 1 watt off on the 10 watt scale. It was about 5 to 10 on the 10 watt scale, and then as much as 15 on the 1 kilowatt, 15-20 on 1 kilowatt, just from my quick test. I only did about 200 watts into it. So modulation scale was a little bit off as well. Might need a little bit of adjustments inside, or maybe some new caps and stuff to get it up to par, because it's a bit of an older meter. But overall, pretty cool. And I would definitely say, if you had a unit in Grant or a Cobra 148 and you had that channel switch on it and you're always having trouble figuring out where you were and you wanted to be able to just key up and see, I mean, that's where these frequency counters built into the meter is kind of nice. And you know, the SWR part of it worked well, so you could definitely check your SWR with it. So anyway, interesting meter. Thought I'd show you real quick. The heater's not working out here and it is cold, so I'm going to wrap this one up. Have a good day. CV Radio Magazine.